Hey guys, what's going on? This is going to be a little different video. Um, Instead of just talking about music I'm buying, years ago when I started attending concerts, God, how old was I? I think I attended concerts as a kid, a lot of country concerts, Johnny Cash, Oak Ridge Boys, Statler Brothers, and stuff when I was super small, 6 years old. But when I really got into music later on, I started keeping all the ticket stubs when I started going to rock concerts and or metal concerts. And through the years, I collected them in these books where I would display the ticket stubs and maybe some pictures and whatnot. And I thought, while I still have all my faculties, so to speak, I would talk about each page, kind of a different video. I haven't really seen anyone do this on YouTube. Not that I have looked for it either, but I'm just going to start with page 1 today. Some of these might be embarrassing. I don't really care. But you can kind of see how my musical tastes changed through the years. So again, I've seen a lot of shows as a young kid. I remember going to the county fairs and seeing country acts in the late 70s and early 80s. Country acts always played country fairs. There really weren't a lot of arenas around back then like there are today. It seems like every town, even where I live, has an arena of some size. But a lot of well-known country acts. I remember, I believe I saw Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton too. I kind of remember that. But they would tour these county fairs, and this was not the place I saw them, which was over by the Indiana-Illinois border. Not a huge town at all. There were a bunch of small towns together, and these country bands would just tour and play the county fairs. So, but we're going to start on page 1 here. I'm going to show you the page here, and then we're going to talk about a few of these shows. This first one you all will probably laugh at. This is Poison. I saw Poison February 2nd, 1991 in Springfield, Illinois. It says with Warrant on the ticket, but at the time, Warrant was opening for Poison, and Warrant didn't like, if I remember correctly, they were pissed because they weren't getting enough stage lighting and, the rock star runway for singers, whatever. So Warrant got pissed off, dropped off the tour, and Don Dokken of Dokken, who I've talked about before, opened. He had some solo stuff at one time, so it was cool to see Dokken because he sang a lot of Dokken songs that I liked. Poison actually put on a great laser show. They played, I think, this album, which one? It was the album with, when they were popular on MTV, Something to Believe In. Open Up and Say, oh, was that the album? No, there was one after that, Flesh and Blood. That was the tour when Poison really blew up. So, it was my first real rock concert that I remember. I remember being a little nervous, thinking it was going to be too loud, and it really was not loud at all. My ears took it just fine. But I was in the middle of listening to a lot of different music, and you'll be able to see just a few short months later, right here, I went to see the Clash of the Titans tour in June 11th, 1991. Same venue. 4 months later, if you don't remember, 91 Clash of the Titans tour was Slayer, Megadeth, was Anthrax there? I don't see. That's why I'm making this video. I know Slayer and Megadeth played. I want to say Anthrax. I could be wrong. And then on this leg of the tour, Alice in Chains actually opened, and Man in the Box had just come out. So I got to see Lane Staley at the time. I didn't know Alice in Chains was going to become what they became, but I did enjoy their first album, Facelift. And that was the only album they had out. And they played pretty much, I want to say, 6 songs off of it. They got booed. People, if you know the Slayer crowd, especially the Slayer 91, people didn't want to hear Alice in Chains before Slayer. They barely wanted to hear Megadeth and potentially Anthrax. But it was a great tour because, if I remember right, Anthrax was touring The Persistence of Time. Megadeth was touring Rust in Peace, which is a classic in my opinion, and Slayer was touring on Seasons in the Abyss. I was scared shitless looking at the floor because the Slayer pit was just something I had never witnessed in person before. I've never witnessed anything like that. So to see the rabid fan base, I saw people bloody, people coming out of the pit exhausted, sweaty, passing out, and then they would turn right back around and go back out there again. But they put on a great stage show. If you remember the cover of Seasons in the Abyss, it was all red, and they had a bunch of red lights, and it was a great show. Next, this was another weird one in Champaign, Illinois. Anthrax and Public Enemy. So this was really before rap and metal were merged, I think, or as popular, I should say. So this was October 6th, 91. So about 4 months after the Slayer show, which leads me to believe maybe Anthrax wasn't on the Clash of the Titans tour. But so this was rap and metal touring together. If you remember, Attack of the Killer Bees, it came out with Anthrax, and they did a cover Bring the Noise by Public Enemy. Primus opened on this show, and a group called Young Black Teenagers, which I believe had one of the guys from the Jump Around band. I don't remember, not Cypress Hill, House of Pain. They weren't anything that great. Primus was awesome. Again, this was Primus in their heyday. Sailing the Seas of Cheese was out. Some of the names of the players are escaping my mind right now. Their bass player was famous. I can't remember his name, but when he came out and started flumping on the bass and doing that weird dance he does, the crowd just went crazy. Public Enemy, the crowd was kind of lukewarm to Public Enemy. Anthrax, people kind of got more into Anthrax, and then at the end of the show, all the bands came out and they sang Bring the Noise together. So you had Primus out there with Young Black Teenagers, Anthrax, and Public Enemy. So after that, October, sometime right here, was a band I'm sure you all know. October 29th, 1991, Metallica. This was Peoria, Illinois. Like I said, October 29th. If I remember correctly, I still have the concert t-shirt from this. It obviously doesn't fit anymore, but this was the kickoff to the Black Album tour. There's an old saying around these parts that if it plays in Peoria, it'll play anywhere. And I think that being said, the diverse crowds in Peoria, pretty much if you could succeed in Peoria, it would play in any other city because Peoria really isn't that big. This was the kickoff to the Metallica tour of the Black Album. I just started to get in Metallica. I was kind of lukewarm on the Black Album. I liked it at the time. Again, this was 1991. I loved And Justice for All. I wore that tape out. I think I still have my copy, but wore it out. It's when you hear their later stuff, especially like, the Load and Reload albums, everyone thought, oh, they're selling out with the Black Album. And then you hear Load and Reload and you're like, well, they really are selling out there. So the Black Album actually sounded heavy. I went back and listened to it not too long ago, and it was nice to hear the Jason Newsted's bass come through on that album. So there are some heavy, chunky riffs on the album, even though people love to hate on it. I don't hate the album overall. There are some good songs on there. The non-hits are pretty good. And then in March 5th, 1992, went to see Metallica again. This was in Champaign, Illinois. Crowd wasn't as into it. It was Champaign, for those of you that don't know. This is where the Fighting Illini play basketball. Crowd really wasn't into it. It was more of a college crowd. I don't think Metallica was really a band that would appeal to college kids at the time. The crowd wasn't as into it as they were in Peoria. Metallica had that cool diamond stage where when the show started, the stage was covered, and then the Enter Sandman would start and the lights would flicker up and the top would come up and the lights would shine down. It was pretty cool. Set list didn't change much. That was kind of disappointing, but anytime a band like that would come around here, I would go check them out. Next up, Def Leppard, December 6th, 1992. I remember it being very cold that night. Again, this was at the Assembly Hall in Champaign. I don't remember which tour, 1992, probably Hysteria. Def Leppard had a flat stage with a bunch of lights and shit, but the lead singer, Joe Elliott, was sick. So a lot of the shit I wanted to hear from Pyromania and earlier stuff, they didn't really play because his voice couldn't hit some of the notes. So they didn't play Photograph. Had his Def Leppard have a show and not play Photograph? I don't know. But anyway, that was not really that great of a show. It was kind of boring, to be honest with you. But they played the hits and everyone was happy. Next up, we're going to go these two shows. What do we got here? I have a couple flyers here and a couple ticket stubs, so I'll explain these a little bit. So the Canopy Club this is the flyer here. And the show I went to go see, if you look real close right here, hopefully the Derailers. They're like a country swing band. I don't remember where they're from, but I don't even know if they're still around. I think they are, but they play country swing. Again, this was another, I've gone from Poison to Metallica to Anthrax to country swing all within, this show was in sometime in the late 90s, maybe. I honestly can't remember. I don't have a ticket stub for that show, but it was a place that had a lot of couches and stuff, and you just watch bands play. Then April 20th, I got to see Pantera for the first time. That was April 20th, 1994, at the Aragon Ballroom, which is still open in Chicago. For those of you who've never been to the Aragon Ballroom, it's pretty much an old ballroom. You come into the venue and you go upstairs, and then maybe another flight of stairs, and there's just an old school ballroom with, there are some seats around the top, but very few. It's pretty much just a flat floor. This was Pantera on the Far Beyond Driven tour. Crowbar opened. I was not familiar with Crowbar. I wish I had been more familiar with them at the time, because I've kind of grown to respect Crowbar quite a bit, and like a lot of their songs. Pantera, again, this was a time, 94. So 91 came, and 92, and Metallica started to become these rock stars and behaving certain ways. And it was like, people that used to make fun of me for wearing a Metallica shirt, I now saw those same people at the mall wearing a Metallica shirt, and I was a little perturbed. And to me, Pantera, between their first album, not Far Beyond Driven, what was the name of them? Can't remember the name of the first album. See, I'm getting old. But Far Beyond Driven came out, and after Pantera got so popular with that first album, I was worried that, oh great, so we got Pantera. They're kind of the saviors of the heavy mainstream metal. Are they going to turn around and become, are they going to pull a Metallica and get a little softer? And they actually came out with Far Beyond Driven and got heavier. The production was more raw. The songs were heavier, faster, more brutal. I still love Far Beyond Driven to this day. Next up, April 30th, I have the flyer and the ticket stub right here. April 30th of 94, I went to see Anthrax up in Chicago at the Riviera. I think it's a theater. It's actually just around the block from the Aragon Ballroom. It's also still there, but this is the flyer right here. So it was Anthrax and Fight opening. And for those of you that don't know who Fight is, that was Rob Halford left Judas Priest for a bit. He was kind of inspired by the younger bands and what they were doing, how heavy they were. I think Pantera was a huge influence. He went off and formed Fight, which was like a thrash metal type band. First album, I think, is very good. There are some great songs on that album. Anthrax has always been a pretty good live band. Riviera is a pretty small theater. I don't remember a whole lot about the show, but I remember Rob Halford coming out and just having his head down, and he had on this leather coat with all the spikes on it and his leather cap, and he kept his head down. And I was telling my buddy, I'm like, is he trying to hide his face because this isn't like Rob Halford and some guy's trying to lip sync or something? But it was Rob Halford. So it was a pretty good show. Nothing great. But you can see there I saw Pantera and Anthrax and Crowbar and Fight within 10 days of each other. So drove up to Chicago, drove back. Another funny story about this Pantera show. We had met some folks up there. I had a Honda Civic at the time, and those of you that know, a 91 Honda Civic holds 4 people, barely. We had met ran into some folks at the show, and on the way back, we were following them. We were going to go to a party on the way back, which didn't transpire, but we were 2 cars back, pretty good length. The first car avoided a deer. Our buddies in front of us, we were like, oh, shoo, the first car avoided that deer, where the deer had darted out to the side. The deer came back, and our buddies nailed the deer, and we saw the deer fly. We saw him pull over, and then as we were coming through, there was dust and debris, and we were like, oh, great, what are we going to do? So some people may have been indulging themselves a little bit, if you will. Again, this was 2 o'clock in the morning on the interstate. No one was out. So I pulled over behind him. My buddy's car was totaled. I don't believe he had insurance at the time. There were 4 guys in that car, and we were like, what are we going to do? We don't want to call the police. So we crammed another 4 people into my Honda Civic. It had one of those fold down back seats. So there were two guys laying sideways in the trunk. 4 guys in the back seat, or 3 guys sitting up, laying on the seats or sitting on the seats. And then we had 2 people in the front seat, which it wasn't bucket seating. So we had 1 guy sitting with his legs spread where it was a stick shift. So I had to it was very awkward, but I kind of had to lean like this. We were driving. And the funny part of this was we had, again, 8 of us in there. 8 guys, 100 one of the guys probably weighed at least 300 pounds. We had all that weight in the Honda Civic. I wasn't speeding. I personally was not drunk or anything, so that was good. And we're just cruising down the interstate. We're like, all right, we're going to make it home. And I look up, and there's a state police officer coming up behind us. And, I tell everybody, just be cool. We didn't give him the stare down or anything. He slowly went by us. And I just kind of looked over and gave him a, how you doing? He probably ran my plates and saw I wasn't a threat. We all pretty much thought we were dead to rights, so to speak. But the officer probably looked over and said, I really don't want to deal with this paperwork tonight on what I could potentially find in that car, all of the laws that are being broken. The seatbelt law had just came out a few years before that, at least in my state. The cop kept going, and we all made it home safely eventually. Next day, I took my buddy back up to his car. I was still on the side of the road, and it was totaled. He just took the plates off of it, and I took him back home, and he said, junkyard can have it. So that was a fun time. I've got a few other cool stories as I go through these ticket stubs. So hopefully this was cool for you guys. I've got 2 books like this of ticket stubs. I've got a really cool Slayer story, which ties to Jeffrey Dahmer, that I will be talking about probably in a few more pages. It's kind of creepy. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Let me know in the comments if you like these videos or not, and there will be plenty more of these to come. So thanks for checking it out. Later.